Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alpha Kappa Psi's webinar entitled The Complete Guide to Chapter Finances. My name is Desiree Williams, and I serve AK Psi as the Digital Education Coordinator. I will be your webcast producer. And now, before we dive into the content, I would like to review the web-based features available to you. This webinar will be advanced remotely, but at the bottom of your screen, there are multiple application widgets you can use throughout the program. If you are accessing the webinar via a mobile device, you may need to scroll down or over on your screen to access these widgets. Every window on your screen is also customizable, so feel free to resize and move them to fit your needs. A copy of the slideshow and other additional materials are available in the green Resource List widget on the right. If you have any technical difficulty, please click on the Help widget with the question mark icon. Lastly, if you have a question, please launch the Q&A widget to submit that, and we will follow up with you after the program. This webinar has been created to discuss simplifying chapter finances. Chapter finances serve as the backbone of chapter operations. Much like finances are the engine that drives businesses. Your chapter finances need to operate smoothly to allow for chapter success. Today, we will explain the various fees, dues, and premiums of the fraternity, as well as review budgeting and fiscal management skills. For our program today, Dina Gospel will present. Dina attended Siena College and graduated with a degree in marketing and management. She has more than 15 years of office management experience in a variety of industries. She has extensive knowledge in human resources, customer service, financial management, accounting, and marketing. Dina enjoys traveling, watching movies, and spending time with her husband and 3 children. Dina serves as the accounting administrator for AK Psi.
Thanks for the introduction, Desiree. Let's start today's program by discussing the responsibility of the treasurer. The treasurer has many direct responsibilities which affect the ongoing health of the chapter, from working with the executive board and paying fees to maintaining a current balance and preparing a budget to work with the Heritage Center staff. This role is vital to the success of the chapter. This person will also perform a chapter audit, maintain the convention savings plan, create a travel savings account, and ensure a healthy beginning balance in the checking and savings account at the start of each academic term. From a financial perspective, the treasurer is the chief financial officer of the chapter. The top 3 responsibilities of the treasurer include maintaining the current balance of your checking account. A couple common questions to ask each week are, how much money is in the chapter's accounts? Is it enough to cover the upcoming expenses? Knowing the chapter's accounts payable, which is the money the chapter owes to the Heritage Center and others. Do you have a current balance with the Heritage Center? Having a current balance means all bills currently outstanding whose due dates have not yet arrived have been paid in full. Remember that it's a minimum standard to have a current balance on both December 31st and June 30th. Lastly, knowing the chapter's accounts receivable. How much money will the chapter collect for chapter operations? As treasurer, you also need to be sure all dues and invoices are paid in a timely manner. You must respond to the Heritage Center. It's also important to share the current checking account balance, accounts receivable, and accounts payable at each chapter meeting. There should not be secrets regarding the financial state of the chapter. To help the treasurer operations run a little smoother, let's break down different aspects of the position. To begin, we will dive into invoices and statements. The chapter receives an invoice several times per semester. Invoices are only emailed, so be sure to update this information to the correct address through the Chapter Spot single sign-on in AK Psi community. You'll receive the following invoices each semester: student member dues, pledge induction fees, initiation fees, and convention savings plan. You'll also receive an insurance invoice in the fall. Invoices for student member dues are generated on September 1st and January 2nd. You'll receive invoices for pledge fees when you report your pledges, an invoice for initiation fees when you report your initiates, and a convention savings plan invoice in October and February. Additionally, you'll receive a student member dues invoice when you report members who have been reinstated, and you'll receive a credit memo when student member dues when you remove people from your roster. Credit memos and overpayments will be applied to the chapter's oldest invoice. If there are no invoices, then the credit will remain on the account and be applied to future invoices. No credit will be refunded back to the chapter in the form of a check or credit card payment. Please note that the monthly statements have a running balance. The balance you see on the October statement will be different than the balance on the February statement. Each month, the chapter will have activity that will affect the statement. Each statement will have a beginning balance, followed by the month's activity and the amount due. Additionally, finance charges are assessed every month for unpaid invoices over 30 days. If you receive an invoice that you think is incorrect, please call the Heritage Center to check. Never wait to pay a bill just because you think it's wrong. For your student member dues billing, it is acceptable to short pay that invoice. However, it is essential to adjust your official roster with the Heritage Center by the appropriate deadline. All roster changes may be made by logging into the community to access Chapter Spot, which is only available to chapter officers. Often, incorrect statements occur due to failure to note appropriate roster changes. Incorrect rosters can affect your chapter's dues and insurance, so it's important to update them with any change to member status, including suspension, leave of absence, and removal. Rosters must be updated by November 1st and March 1st with no exceptions. We understand our statements can be confusing. It works best to keep an Excel spreadsheet of what is being charged, credited, and paid to help you understand. You should always match up the invoices to the statements to make sure they correlate with each other. Whenever you are confused, please give us a call. That is why we are here, to help you and your officers understand how to run your chapter. It's always better to ask instead of guessing or not contacting us at all. Be sure you keep every invoice, as you will need one to match the invoice number with the statement. As you're going through your invoices and statements, it's also important to understand the costs outlined in each. This is important for the entire chapter to know, as it is the student member's money. Review each fee with the chapter at the beginning of each academic term so they understand where the money goes. This way, the Vice President of Membership can also include the fees in the recruitment program. The fees for the 2018-19 year are as follows. Pledge induction fees are $48 per person. Initiation fees are $84 per person. Student member dues are $60 per person. The liability insurance are $30 per person based on the previous academic year. The surety bond is $30. Convention savings plan is $250 per term. These are the amounts the fraternity will charge each chapter and should be used as a baseline. The chapter should be charging more than these amounts for each category to have operating funds on hand. If you only charge these amounts, then the chapter will lack funds for local programming to improve the member experience. The fees sent to the Heritage Center are used to fund fraternity services such as educational programs, chapter service operations, technology infrastructure and systems, the printing and distribution of the diary, and volunteer budgets, among other things. All services directly benefit membership in the fraternity. The fees also cover normal operating expenses incurred to secure the future of the organization. Collecting money is a direct responsibility of the treasurer. Not collecting dues in a timely manner is a common mistake, and it only hurts the chapter when it comes time to pay. The treasurer should collect dues and induction fees early enough to be able to make the payment on time. Each member must pay dues on time. Paying dues is a cornerstone of brotherhood. If every member does not pay dues, then you'll see the chapter start to slip into debt. The chapter needs to maintain a good financial plan and offer beneficial opportunities to all members, so they want to continue to pay dues. The same goes for collecting registration fees for PBLI and convention. Registering members with a chapter charge or paying for alumni without collecting funds in advance is a trap many chapters fall into. Make sure to receive all payments before the money is due to ensure the chapter will not have to cover unnecessary expenses. Even though PBLI doesn't occur until the spring, registration is due in the fall. To maximize savings, start planning as early as possible in the fall semester. If your chapter struggles with getting members to pay on time, consider creating an incentive. As long as you are charging at least the amount sent to the Heritage Center, chapter dues can vary. So one idea is to offer an early dues discount if they pay ahead of the deadline. Your chapter should also work with each member who can't pay their dues. Chapters can set up a payment plan with members. Have members do extra fundraising or do service work for the chapter. You can help the chapter seek out corporate sponsors or even coordinate a fundraiser to seek money from alumni. Be aware, however, if you do this, the alumni cannot write these donations off on their taxes because it violates IRS regulations. If there is no payment plan worked out and the member cannot or will not pay dues, the member, per the Constitution, is not in good standing when they become 30 days late. They are not entitled to the rights and privileges of membership. At this time, they should be removed from the chapter's official roster. After 60 days of not paying, they are permanently removed from the roster until they pay the applicable amount. Make sure to follow proper procedures in the Constitution. This should be the exception rather than the rule. If you are suspending half of your chapter for non-payment, there is a deeper issue within the chapter that needs to be addressed. Once you have collected the money, it's time to pay the bill. Student member dues are due on October 15th and February 15th. This date is the same every year and should be noted on the chapter calendar. If student member dues are paid after the deadlines, the chapter is charged an additional late fee of $25. The insurance is due on October 15th. You have approximately 45 days to pay your student member dues and insurance invoices from the date of the invoice. So pay your bills on time. If your chapter is required to go through the university to send us your payments, be sure to get a receipt and send that to us ahead of time so we know that you have submitted the request. Unfortunately, sometimes the previous administration hasn't been as keen on paying their bills. You may have come into the office and been notified you are on the collections report. What do you do? In this situation, you must work to pay off the chapter's balance owed. It is still the chapter's responsibility. In the corporate world, that's not written off simply because a company hires a new chief financial officer. The financial standing of the chapter should never be a surprise. In this case, you need to keep up with your bills and stay current. You'll need to work out a payment plan with the Heritage Center to pay off your past due amounts. Remember, Alpha Kappa Psi is a business and the fraternity, and each chapter must run like one. Not paying your bills on time affects more than just your chapter. It has a ripple effect on the other chapters and the fraternity's ability to fund its programs that are afforded with membership. To avoid not being able to pay your bills, it's important to have a chapter budget. Planning ahead can make a world of difference when it comes to the financial standing of your chapter. Budgeting can not only help save the chapter money, but also allows the chapter to see where the money goes. It can be used as a tool to reduce costs and plan fundraising needs. As you start to make your budget, here are a few things to consider. The budget never should project a loss. The net income should be at least zero or a net profit. Study your chapter's spending trends from previous years and calculate an average amount from each category in your budget. This will give you a better idea of how much the chapter actually spends and will give you a realistic amount to work with. For accountability purposes, chapter expenses should be grouped by officer. The revenue and expense estimates should come from specific officer, not the budget officer. For example, the Vice President of Membership should provide membership estimates for dues and pledge fees, and the Social Chair provides social expenses by event. Chairs and officers should submit budget requests at the beginning of their term for the amount they predict they will need. If officers and chairs are utilizing the event planning guides, it will be easier to estimate how much money they are going to need. Estimates should be realistic, not conservative. The budget officer should challenge budget estimates that seem unrealistic, like hoodies costing only $3. Review the budget at the beginning of each term. Make revisions as necessary, not just for expenses, but also revenue. The chapter must approve the budget. The budget should also be turned into the chapter advisor and regional director for review and comments, which should ideally occur directly after it is approved. Once the budget is established, all chairs and officers are responsible for their portion of the budget. If they are projected to spend more than their budgeted amount, they should submit a formal request to obtain the additional funds. Any expense that causes the budget to go over by at least $50 should also be reviewed and approved by the executive committee. For example, if the homecoming tailgate is going to cost $100 more than budgeted, this needs to be reviewed and approved. All budget variances should be reviewed and explained at the end of the term. This information should be noted and passed on to the next treasurer so the budget can be improved next time. Also, remind chairs and officers if they still have money left in their budget toward the end of the fiscal term, they are not obligated to use it. Often, chapters will see officers spend their budget to stock up on items for the next few terms because they have leftover money and are afraid if they don't spend it all, they won't be able to get as much in future terms. This shouldn't be the case. It's wiser to save the money for what the chapter needs and wants. And if there is a bigger need for the budget next term, there are funds to do so. One mistake chapters often make is not budgeting for insurance. Be sure to budget appropriately for this expense so as not to get stuck when the money is due. One tip for preparing for this expense is to include the insurance cost as part of spring dues and hold on to the money until it is due into the fall. Knowing the current fiscal standing of the chapter and where the chapter would like to be at the end of the year can help determine the student dues as well. If there is any programming the chapter plans to host during the year that might be out of budget, it can be reflected in dues for the chapter to make up the difference. Letting your members know where dues are going and why they could increase can help ease members' uncertainties about the total cost. This is a lot of information to absorb and keep track of all the time. To help, we've provided you with a sample budget breakdown to assist in tracking your money and to reconcile against your bank account. The document is available for download in the Resources widget. Start by updating the actual column for the previous year. This would be a good starting point to see what the chapter has accomplished. Add in all the actual revenue and expense lines. You can assess the amount of graduating seniors and determine how to replace that number and then some with recruiting efforts. The number will not affect the budget, but should be a chapter discussion to identify how to prepare for and replace that number. Next up is analyzing your dues to create a budget. Start by breaking down your member dues. How much is being allocated to each committee, and is it enough? Chapters should vote on each dues each semester, so it's important to know this amount ahead of time. This illustration shows exactly how much of your dues is going to each committee. These amounts should be reviewed each semester to determine if the amount set is still sufficient based on previous semester spending, which we will talk about on the next slide. It's also important to assess and prepare for PBLI and convention. If the chapter can figure out how many members will attend PBLI in February, they can start to fundraise in October to have those funds available. By maintaining the budget throughout the semester, you can compare actual expenses to the budgeted amount and see areas of over or underspending and what money still needs collected in dues. This can help you in the future as you see how much money was still needed and if your dues need to be amended. It can also help identify where you can cut costs. This illustrates the importance of collecting dues on time. If the chapter is planning on spending X amount of dollars on an event, they can only do so if all the brothers have paid their budgeted dues, which they voted and agreed to previously. It's a good idea to keep a record of all the chapter's transaction history. This is a running list of each transaction similar to reconciling your checkbook. You're able to see who paid how much, for what, and when. If there are any discrepancies as to whether a brother paid dues or why someone was reimbursed $50, you can compare it to the transaction history. Every 2 weeks or on a monthly basis, someone other than the person who writes checks for your chapter should reconcile this balance to the amount reflected on your bank account statement. The balance should always reconcile it to the bank statement. It is important to note that no reimbursement should be given to any brother who paid for something with their own funds without proper support, such as the receipts and an expense reimbursement form. Overall, this is a sample budget template and can be modified to meet your chapter's needs. This provides a good picture of how the chapter plans to spend money versus what was spent. So each semester, perform an analysis to determine what adjustments need to be made. Lastly, you must keep the chapter informed. As a chapter member, it is both your right and responsibility to stay informed on your chapter's financial standing. Do you know the majority of the dues you pay each semester stay at the chapter level? This is why it is of the utmost importance for the treasurer to report on the following at each chapter meeting: checkbook balance, including all deposits in transit and outstanding checks; additional account balances, including savings, investment, scholarship, and university accounts; receivables and payables, including the balance and nature of any outstanding accounts receivables and payables; additionally, the names and balances of all members who have outstanding financial obligations to the chapter; summarized income statement; actual results versus the approved budget, including explanation for variances both positive and negative; any immediate financial issues. The treasurer needs to present additional information to the chapter at least once during each term, including income expense analysis by percentage and total dollar amount. For example, prepare 2 pie charts, one for income and one for expenses; functional programming analysis of money budgeted and spent on the major functional areas of chapter programming by percentage and total dollar amount. Major functional areas may include recruiting, membership education, professional, social, athletic, scholarship, community service, fundraising, communications, alumni, faculty, publicity, chapter, management, and fraternity-wide events. A dues breakdown analysis of what each dollar of the member dues is used for, by percentage and total dollar amount. For example, of the $110 each member pays for dues each semester, $60 is paid for student member dues billed by the Heritage Center, $10 for recruiting, $15 for insurance, $7 for professional events, $7 for social activities, $3 for publicity, and $3 for awards and recognitions, and $5 for general administrative expenses. Results of any internal and external audits. Finally, year-end financial results. Members should expect and regularly ask for financial updates and hold chapter officers accountable for monies received and distributed by the chapter. After graduation, part of your job description will be to understand your employer's financial situation. Almost all employees have budget responsibilities. Utilize your time at Alpha Kappa Psi to learn the questions to ask and the things to look for in the corporate environment. Another reason to keep the chapter informed about your financial standing is to protect your chapter's assets. Unfortunately, embezzlement and fraud are issues even in our organization. The most effective way to prevent misappropriation of chapter funds is to separate the following duties: authorization, which is signing the checks; record keeping; and custody, meaning maintaining the checkbook. There is nothing worse than starting a new school year and realizing your previous treasurer or president who just graduated took all your chapter funds with them. So stay alert and maintain a checks and balances system so if something were to happen, you would find out immediately. Each month, you should also download your statement and reconcile it. One way to keep your finances transparent is to place PDF copies of your monthly statements in HQ docs arranged by year. We encourage chapters to not use a chapter debit card if possible, but realize that in some cases this may not be possible. If you do have a chapter debit card, follow the suggestions provided by the fraternity, including opening an account prohibiting ATM withdrawals and debit card transactions, never using a debit card to withdraw cash from an ATM machine or to get cash back at a store, and never using the card for a mix of chapter and personal charges. For reimbursements, always use checks and a check request form so you can maintain a record of transactions to see who you reimbursed, when, and for how much. If your university has the option, require 2 officer signatures on all checks and require that 2 officers always be present when withdrawals are made at a bank. These are a few easy ways to help protect yourself as a treasurer and the chapter. Before we close, let's recap a few of the highlights. Be sure to keep all your invoices so you can reconcile them to your statements. If you don't understand them or think something is incorrect, call the Heritage Center. Pay your bills on time. In order to be able to pay your bills on time, you need to be sure your members have enough time to pay the chapter so you aren't waiting on money to be able to cover the cost of all your bills. Maintain a chapter budget and be sure to have the appropriate people allocating for the different areas. It shouldn't be one person making the budget for the entire chapter. Keep everyone informed. It's their chapter and their money, and they should know both what they are paying for and where the money is going. Chapter finances are a critical part of the chapter operation and needs to be treated as such.
Thank you, Dina, for walking us through that content. And before we transition into our frequently asked questions, I want to highlight the key skills that our viewers were exposed to today. By managing the chapter roster and maintaining financial documents and payments, chapter treasurers will gain organizational skills. Through reviewing and creating a chapter budget, treasurers will gain experience with analytical and critical thinking. And now at this point, we are going to transition into some frequently asked questions. If you have other questions, please launch the Q&A widget to submit that, and we will follow up via email after the program. And so for our first question, we don't receive a copy of our invoices. How do we change that or ensure the Heritage Center has our correct contact information?
The best thing to do would be to contact the Heritage Center in the accounting department and also contact your CERC. We definitely want to make sure that we have all the current and updated information, email addresses on file so that you are receiving all of your invoices and credit memos and all of your financial documents. So definitely make sure you contact the accounting department and your CERC for that updated information.
All right, and our next question. Our chapter is consistently on the collections report and/or the past due. What is some advice that you can provide?
That's a great question. We really want to make sure that when you receive your invoices that you are paying them in a timely manner. They are set up for a net 30. That means that you have 30 days to pay those invoices, or they're automatically going to be late and set up on our collections report. So when you receive those invoices, make sure you're diligent in that turnaround time and paying that within that 30-day time frame to avoid being on that collections report. So if you're unable to do that, then you really need to make sure that your finances are in order to pay those in a timely manner.
All right. Moving on, we got billed for a surety bond. Why?
The surety bond covers your treasurer. That's the insurance for your treasurer, and that is a $30 fee, and it's a one-time fee that is assessed in the fall to cover your treasurer.
All right. A lot of our chapters have to do some fundraising. So what are some ideas for fundraising that you could provide them?
That is another great question. There's lots of different things that you can do, and you could do a crowdfunding campaign. There's a shoe drive that's pretty popular. Perhaps you could do recycling cans on campus. There's some partnering with local restaurants. That's always a great idea. And golf tournaments are always very popular. And some cities partner with the universities and colleges where there's large concession stands with their venues that you can get involved in. So those are some great possibilities for some fundraising ideas.
All right, awesome. Moving on to our next question. We're a smaller chapter and can't afford to charge members higher dues. What are some ways to get more operating funds?
Well, that kind of goes along with the fundraising, and we definitely would encourage you to look into your fundraising options there. Also, reach out to your alumni is definitely another option there, and scholarship funds as well.
All right, and our last question for this program. What do we do if we find out a previous treasurer and or a president has embezzled?
This does happen rarely, but it does unfortunately happen, and we encourage you immediately, or even if you have an inkling that this happened, to contact the Heritage Center immediately.
All right. Well, Dina, thank you for joining us and providing your accounting expertise. And for our viewers, if you have any follow-up questions or conversation about this program, please contact education@aksci.org. There are additional resources on chapter finances and other operations on myaksci.org and in the resource widget. And thank you again for joining us.